Okay, so we are live and ready to go. Um, all right, hi everyone. My name is Scottney Young, and I'm the Mentor Experience Manager for Speak Mentorship. I'm so excited today to welcome our guest speaker for the Speak Mentorship Speaker Series. Carolina Jannicelli is joining us from New York City. And Carolina is the managing director at JP Morgan. She's been with JP Morgan for 22 years in a variety of positions, helping a variety of clients and working in various parts of the banking industry. Fortune honored her in 2017 and 2018 as one of the 50 most powerful Latinas in business. So we're very excited to have her with us today. And Carolina, I'm going to allow you to take over. So please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you.
And I'm excited to have you.
Thank you, Scottney. It's great to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, depending on where you're connecting from. I'm very excited to be spending some time with you this morning, talking about a topic that is very important to me. It's almost like a principle by which I live my life, and it certainly has helped me grow as personally and professionally, and that is the topic of leadership, and how to cultivate leadership. And in my experience, leadership started when I found my voice. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. But for starters, I thought I'd introduce myself and give you a little bit of my background, starting from the very beginning, which is telling you about where I grew up, where I'm from. So I was born in Managua, Nicaragua, and you see a map of Central America on your screen. So Nicaragua is the inverted triangle-like country where the top arrow is pointed. Very small country, second poorest country in the Western Hemisphere after Haiti. I am the eldest of 4 siblings. So you see a picture of me with my siblings. I'm the one in the red pants. And I mentioned that because, you know, how we think about leadership and how we sort of find our place in the world is so influenced by our early and just in general, our family life. And as an older sister, I always took very seriously the role of sort of leading the way and sort of taking care of my younger siblings. Grew up in an entrepreneurial home. Both my parents were business owners. They were in the shoe business. They had shoe stores, and the dinner table conversations were about the business, inventory, Christmas season or holiday season, and whether or not sales were expected to go up or down, and marketing and competition. So all these main inputs of business have been part of my life since an early age, and we were all part of it. So I pretty much worked at my parents' stores since I was a little girl, first in the stock room, then helping set up the shelves, and then eventually working with customers. And I graduated when I finally was able to work the register. So that, again, those were very formative experiences for me. Another formative experience that I think will keep coming up in my story is art. And I grew up in a household filled with paintings. Both my parents collected art, and I sort of took it for granted. It was just there. And in retrospect, I realized that exposure to art early on really, again, was a formative experience. My paternal grandfather loved art as well. And I remember many afternoons in his shed, watching television, looking at old National Geographics, and, you know, he'd be painting a watercolor and I'd be there by his side. And so art for me has always been something that I associate with very positively, and really has become a medium for me to understand in general the human experience and my own life. Then something happened when I was a little girl that was sort of disruptive, I guess. There was a civil war in Nicaragua. This started in the late 70s and sort of culminated in 1979. And all through the 80s, the country was arrested by a civil war. And so my family migrated to Costa Rica. So that's migration number one. I've actually been an immigrant twice in my life. And we moved not too far, just right below Nicaragua to Costa Rica. And as you see the second arrow on the map, a small skitty country that's sort of diagonal, that's where we moved. And that's really where I lived from third grade through high school graduation. So then talking a little bit about my school life and those formative years growing up, school is a huge part of my story because I really think of myself as a constant student. I've had a 22-year career in Wall Street and I've never stopped learning. And so school, was actually a very positive experience for me. I loved going to school. I loved learning. I got good grades. That first picture you see, the black and white picture, is an honor society induction ceremony. I am the one towards the left of the picture with the big 80s hair. And I was also involved in multiple extracurricular activities. Early on, I was in the school band. I played the clarinet. I was on the cheerleading squad, and there you see a picture of the cheerleading squad, and I'm the one that's to the left of the dog, the mascot. I was involved in student government and also loved doing fun things with my friends. So talent shows, we would always put together dances and choreographies. And there was just this general enthusiasm about getting involved. I think that's just also part of my personality. But again, it feeds into this idea of bringing energy to something that matters to you. And that, as we will see, is the essence of leadership. One thing I'm very proud of from my time in high school, or it could have been in middle school, I established the first paper recycling program in my school. I actually researched what paper recycling facilities existed in the area. I actually visited the factory, figured out transportation, lined up the small business owners that would come to the school and pick up the paper. And I was just really excited to see that come to life. And it was something that was actually expanded to other schools. And again, it's this idea of putting energy and action behind something that mattered to me. I also had failures and challenges. And one big one that marked me and was a huge learning experience for me was when I ran for school president and I lost. And I remember having worked so hard for that and being so devastated because it wasn't so much that I had lost, is that I believed I had played by the rules and the person I lost to had not. And there had been an investigation at the school just verifying their sources of financing because we had certain limits which we had to adhere to. And, it was sort of the first time in my life where I think the system let me down in a way, where I saw sort of gender, I'm not going to call it discrimination, but sort of power plays at play. And I grew up a lot. It was painful, but it gave me a dose of, hey, this is the real world. And it taught me very early on that everybody has an agenda, and it's important for me to be aware of that. Not necessarily judge it, but not be naive to think that just because we're in a school environment that things are going to work as they should. So just being more savvy about it. and just taking the lessons, I think is very important. And that was one for sure that has stayed with me for a long time. So moving on to college, I always knew I wanted to go to school in the United States. Again, I'm a student. I love to learn. I was the first person from my immediate family to graduate from college. And whenever I thought of college, I just thought of this world of colors and ideas and interesting people. But I also had this visual of myself as a self-sufficient, independent woman. And that also has been just a core building block of how I've lived my life. Certainly surrounding myself with people I care about, that make me better, that I enjoy, but never for a second expecting anyone to sort of step in and sort of carry my load. It's this idea of keeping my side of the street clean, and not in a way that rejects the love and support of others, but certainly it's about building confidence and feeling capable and competent of driving my agenda, driving my the things that matter to me forward. And that has served me quite well my whole life. I went to Babson College. And actually, it was through Babson that I connected with Hetal, and that led me to participate in this webinar today. She's an alum, as am I. And Babson is an undergraduate business program, essentially. So as I mentioned, I grew up in a home of business owners, and I knew that that's what I wanted to study. And it was a wonderful experience. My academic focus was on business, finance, investments. And about halfway through my time at Babson, I realized that, I probably should start thinking about what I wanted to do post college. Among my circle of friends and colleagues at school, investment banking and consulting and accounting were sort of primary career opportunities post-college. And it makes sense because Babson, like I said, is very business focused. I had never heard of Wall Street. I had never met a banker in my life. But the more I learned about it, the more interested I became, particularly the fact that without a global banking system, it is impossible for foreign investment to be channeled into emerging economies and small countries like Nicaragua, like Costa Rica, like other developing economies around the world. You need the capital markets, you need banks, the banking system to channel those direct investments into those countries that would allow for the development of educational programs, infrastructure, etc. So this idea that by joining an investment bank, I could help support indirectly and sometimes very directly the growth of emerging economies gave me a real sense of purpose to pursue a career in investment banking. And that's what I did. Initially, it felt like this insurmountable challenge. Like I said, I'd never met an investment banker. But as it happens, my roommate from college had applied to an investment banking program at what was then the Chase Manhattan Bank, and she got in. And the minute my roommate got into college, I knew that I could do it too. And that to me is the perfect example of the power of role models. Somebody that looked like me, that sounded like me, that had a very similar background as me, had been able to accomplish this goal, which meant I could do it too. And that's really all she did to help me. In other words, she didn't sit down and coach me through the interview process. She didn't give me any tips. All she did was get the job. And that's all I needed to be filled with energy, confidence, and enthusiasm that I could do it too. And that has also been formative for me because now I actually proactively seek role models, and they're out there. More and more, there are women from all walks of life, from different cultures, different family backgrounds, that are demonstrating that we are capable of having successful, impactful careers in the corporate sector, in the social sector, education, science, etc. And that's why I actually commend and love the work that Speak Mentorship does, because it provides a forum for these role models to come share their stories and inspire and empower all of you to believe in your abilities, in your potential, and really go for those stretch goals. So now I have the job. Now I'm in banking. I started my career in the Latin America investment banking group. And when you're investment banking, your clients are companies. Companies need capital. They need loans. They need to tap into the debt market, the bond markets, etc. So I did a variety of things for different types of companies in the investment bank. I did credit reviews for oil and gas companies. I covered clients in the chemicals industry. I worked, like I said, originating, sort of structuring and bringing to market bonds for Latin American companies that were tapping into the global capital markets to have investors buy their bonds. And with the money from the sale of those bonds, they could grow their factories, generate more jobs, grow their businesses, support their local economies. So my goal, my vision for why, or the impact I wanted to have by joining investment banking, really came true. As my career evolved, I had the opportunity to learn about other parts of financial services, and I wound up getting the opportunity to work in the private bank. So in private banking, our job is to help wealthy families, individuals, entrepreneurs preserve and grow their wealth. Put together a plan that helps them achieve their goals by investing their money in a variety of strategies, making sure they're not taking excessive amounts of risk. One of the things that makes my job really meaningful is that many of these families, as part of their goals, want to give back to society. So a lot of the wealth that these families generate over the years ends up going back to foundations, non-for-profits, also towards education of their own children and grandchildren. So it's a very dynamic and interesting role and opportunity to get to know a variety of people. Currently, my focus is to work with attorneys. So my team is dedicated to helping some of the top attorneys in the United States do just that. Identify what their goals are for their wealth and how to achieve that over time. Initially, I covered Latin American clients, and so that connection to Latin America certainly stayed with me as I moved into private banking, and it's only more recently that I'm focused on attorneys here in the United States. Something else that I did sort of in the interim was take a 2-year role. It was a global role to rethink our company's approach to campus recruiting and also what we call our analyst and associate programs. And these are the entry-level programs that take a new hire and train and develop them and teach them how to become successful financial advisors, investors, etc. So talent development is a complete passion of mine. And again, if you were to look at my life, you would see different examples where I've put time and energy behind helping individuals maximize their potential, because frankly, somebody helped me develop mine. And I truly believe that with help and guidance, we can tap into all of our potentials and really make the world a better place and be happier in the process, by the way. So going back to this idea that I'm a student for life, something else that I did sort of as I grew my career was to go back to school. I knew I wanted to get a master's degree. I knew I did not want to get an MBA, a master's in business administration, because I'd been to Babson, which was a business school. My career was growing. A lot of people go back to business school as a way to hit the reset button in their career, maybe do a pivot from one industry to the other. None of those goals were relevant to me. I was happy at the company I was in, but I really wanted to go to school because I wanted to learn about something that I was passionate about, and that passion is art. So I pursued a master's degree in the history of art and design at the Pratt Institute. It was a part-time effort because I never stopped working. So I would take 1 or 2 classes per semester. And after several years, I completed my degree, which included writing a thesis. I wrote my thesis on the history of the JP Morgan Chase art collection. So I work at JP Morgan Chase, and we actually have a wonderful art collection that is iconic. It's very historic. It is very beautiful, sort of known around the world. And when I first developed this really deeper passion for art, I actually wanted to read about the collection and realized there was no book that told the story. So I said, all right, I'll write it. And that became my thesis. And there you see a picture of me in my cap and gown the day I finally completed my master's degree. I was ecstatic because that was a lot of hard work to get done. So today, like I said, I manage a business within the private bank, covering attorneys. And, you know, I wanted to maybe share a little bit with you about what my day-to-day looks like. So when you are in a senior management role, essentially the role is to do whatever you need to do to set up your team for success, to set up your clients for success, and to drive successful business results. So part of my job is to be an ambassador for my team amongst the legal industry. So I spend a lot of time speaking with, developing relationships with the leaders at the law firms that we cover, and also other centers of influence, meaning individuals that are somehow related to the law firms industry that could be very valuable contacts to facilitate introductions, refer us to potential clients, and who actually also benefit from a relationship with us because we can also make introductions, etc. So it's that give and take, and that's a big part of business, by the way. You are going to meet people, and it's not just business, any career, that might not be your end clients, but they can be invaluable contacts, sources of information. And it's important to recognize them and sort of reciprocate as well. And that will motivate people to want to help you. I spend a lot of time working with the members of my team. I have a team of about 40 people, and I spend a lot of time coaching, developing them, making sure that they have clarity of what their goals are, how they can achieve those goals, if they need support or help, training or some other tool to be more successful. That's where I come in. I also get involved in certain client relationships as needed. And obviously I manage our P&L, right? Our bottom line. I have growth targets for my business, and it's very important that I deliver on those targets financially, because that's what keeps our bank healthy and growing. And of course, that all also, the stronger our business is, the better of a workplace it becomes for the members of my team, the better we can serve our clients, the more profitable we are, etc. So those are sort of some of the high level key priorities. And then, of course, given my personal passions and my background, I am very involved with diversity and inclusion activities at JP Morgan, and I will talk a little bit more about that. And the picture that you see there is actually of the lobby of our corporate headquarters at 270 Park Avenue in New York City. That's where I'm based. And it's not uncommon to see colleagues gathering, planning, as part of how they service their clients. So now that we've sort of shared a little bit of my background and my journey, I want to focus on the business of finding your voice, which is critical for leadership. For me, a condition to finding my voice was to build confidence first, because finding your voice takes courage. And having a strong foundation of self-acceptance and confidence is absolutely essential. So self-acceptance was the first building block for me. For a long time, the fact that I was Central American, female, in a male-dominated environment, a white male-dominated environment, was quite intimidating. And initially, my instinct was to try to fit in by minimizing what made me different, by trying to make my differences go away. I didn't talk about my background in Latin America. I tried to figure out what all these American men did on weekends, like playing golf or watching sports. And I would try to learn about sports and try to fit into their conversation by transforming myself into what I thought would make me relatable to them. And in the process, I abandoned myself. I abandoned my background, my identity. And when you do that, it doesn't feel good. And it actually weakens your sense of self-acceptance and self-love. And guess what happens? If you are weakened and you feel you've abandoned yourself, you can't possibly be a leader. Because the essence of leadership is putting energy and action behind the things that matter to you. But if I'm hiding behind this sort of mask of being somebody who I'm not, I'm even confused about what is it that matters to me, to be honest. So that journey of self-acceptance was absolutely critical and the very beginning of what helped me find my voice and lead with my voice. So I embraced my background to myself, just even in my own thoughts in my mind, not to feel shame or not to feel any sense of disadvantage, to actually reframe what I could bring to the table. Hey, I am multicultural. I have 3 passports. I speak 3 languages. I can bring ideas to group discussions that nobody else around the table who didn't have my experience can bring. Wait a minute, I have something good to contribute, and let me get that out. So I reframed this whole idea of fitting in and moved it away from blending in, which was not serving me or anybody, to actually amplifying the conversation, expanding the set of ideas with my differentiated contributions. This is a lot of internal work. And one thing that helped me raise my own self-awareness of what was going on was meditation. So I meditate every day. And through meditation, I actually was able to slow down enough to realize what was going on. And to have that moment of insight when I said, if I can't accept myself, how can I expect others to accept me? If others don't accept me, how can I lead them? So it was a very, very important spiritual, mental, emotional journey. It takes time. We are all a work in process. There's no set timeline. It's just a matter of having the willingness and the curiosity to explore that, whatever that might look like for you. So as my self-acceptance grew, my ability to make space and time in my life for my passions grew as well. So as I mentioned, getting my master's degree in the history of art and design as opposed to a master's in finance or business was a way of honoring my passion for art. Also self-care. Something that builds self-acceptance is taking care of my body, mind, and spirit. So exercising, eating well, getting enough sleep, doing things I enjoy, all those things have been such powerful confidence builders for me. Being of service to others is a wonderful way to build confidence because you realize you see your own power. You see your own ability to transform lives in ways that might seem small at first, but the more you do it, the more you value your ability to be a change agent for the better. That's a huge confidence booster. I also learned, and this again was part of raising my self-awareness, of a very debilitating habit that I think a lot of women share, and I certainly did, which was to over-apologize. I was late for a meeting. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I wanted to see this report difference. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. And what happens when we sort of have that mindset is we sort of diminish ourselves. It almost says, I don't deserve to learn. I don't deserve to make my mistakes. I apologize. There's a hierarchical mindset. And we put ourselves at the bottom of that if that's our reaction. And I've learned to switch that for gratitude. So if I'm late for a meeting, rather than apologizing, I'll now say, thank you so much for your patience. I appreciate you waiting 1 or 2 extra minutes before you start the meeting. When somebody gives me feedback because I made a mistake or they want to see the information or the report differently than how I presented it, thank you so much for the feedback. It's a great idea. You've just helped me learn something new today. Try that. It will boost your confidence and it will just start to shift those old patterns of thinking that hold us down. Finally, we can't do this alone and we shouldn't do this alone. And so surrounding ourselves with what I call a tribe, a lot of people are embracing this concept of a tribe, with people that care about you, that you trust, to sort of be your own board of directors, if you will. If there's a major decision you need to do, talk about it with friends, colleagues, family members, people whose judgment you trust. And you also know are people who care about you. We make better decisions once we've said them out loud, once we've named them and spoken about them with other people. And that has been something that I learned much later in my journey, and I wish I had learned a little sooner. But now I have my tribe. I have people that I trust, that care about me, who I respect, whose judgment I look up to, that help me make decisions. And it doesn't have to be coworkers or other students. It could be professors. It could be neighbors, people that just you instinctively feel could be valuable contributors to ideas and perspective. And then this is pretty straightforward, but it has to be said, preparation. I do believe that if we fail to plan, we plan to fail. So whether it's a big situation at work or at school, or in a family or social scenario, the more prepared you are, the more confident you'll feel when you're actually out there executing on the idea, the presentation, etc. So preparation is an automatic way to boost your confidence. So once you've built the confidence, we move into using it to speak up. And now I'm going to share something that was also a massive revelation for me. I was brought up in a culture that basically condemned questioning authority. I was raised in a culture that said, if this is the authority, it's actually disrespectful and inappropriate for you to challenge it in any way. So for years, I was afraid to join in a debate or volunteer a different point of view because I thought that it would be interpreted as me fighting or me being hostile. Well, guess what? A debate is not a fight. When we debate an idea, that's what we're doing, debating the idea. We're not judging the person who's sharing that idea. If there wasn't an exchange of ideas, we would still think the world was flat. We wouldn't have developed technology. I mean, innovation is precisely the result of people coming together, sharing different points of view, and having something new emerge from that. And so my contribution to you today is to just invite you to raise your awareness about what aspect of your culture might be a blockage, an obstacle to you actually engaging in a dialogue that allows you to share your point of view and your perspective. And the way that played out for me is it started small. So I spend a lot of time in meetings. It's a big part of working in corporate America. And I would sit there for years having this mental conversation with myself about what the discussion was. And I would say to myself, oh no, I disagree. They're not taking this or that into account. But I wouldn't dare to speak up, especially if it was a very senior person. What I learned to do, what felt like a middle ground, was just to pose a question. So you don't actually have to tell the person of authority or a peer, hey, I disagree. You're not taking this, that, or that into account. All you can say is, have we considered the consequences of this idea on these other three elements? What if we were to look at this from this other perspective? Just asking a question without judgment, with curiosity. And by the way, ask it with curiosity. Be prepared for the answer, right? Don't get stuck in your own agenda. Maybe there's something else that you yourself hadn't thought about. So don't cheat yourself out of the opportunity of learning. But please, definitely ask the question. Expand the dialogue, expand the conversation. And with those baby steps, before you know it, you'll be very comfortable being more direct. And as long as you handle yourself with professionalism and respect, you really should never fear being open to a discussion, especially if your motive is to serve, if your motive is to truly drive a better outcome. Some people speak just to speak, maybe to claim their seat, maybe just to call attention for themselves. That's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about a legitimate and authentic contribution to a conversation, to an exchange of ideas. The other point I want to make about learning how to speak up is, again, something I've learned. For years, my boss would give me feedback that it took me a long time to get to the point. If I was proposing something, I would just take him or her through a story of what the problem was that I was trying to solve and what I researched and what I learned and this and that. And it was this winding road of stories until I finally got to the bottom line. And my boss would always say, Carolina, you got to be more direct. In the business world, people just want you to get to the point. And I kept getting that feedback, and it was so hard for me to do something about it because I really didn't know what I needed to change until I discovered why I did what I did. And the reason I tended to go through the big story was because I was insecure about my idea. And I felt that if I could lay the foundation and sort of prove to my boss that I'd done my homework, that I was using solid data, that my rationale made sense, that by the time I got to the bottom line, I would have the credibility, the trust to make the point and have the point be taken. I needed to let go of that insecurity. I needed to believe in my process. I needed to believe in my ideas and the value of my perspective in order to get to the point first. So the acronym I'm going to share with you to help you remember that is BLUF, which stands for bottom line up front. Start with a bottom line. And trust me, whoever you're presenting to will not be shy about asking you for further details if further details are required. And you're going to be prepared to provide those details. So get to the point first. Trust yourself. Trust that you've gotten to that conclusion for valid reasons. And you will be a more effective communicator. You will gain credibility, and more opportunities will open up. And of course, this entire idea of learning to speak up is based on another personal journey and sort of growth process, which is you've got to get used to feeling uncomfortable. Another huge revelation for me was that just because something didn't feel comfortable, it didn't mean it was wrong. It probably meant that I was growing and I needed to keep going. So don't confuse the feelings of discomfort with the messaging that this thing that you're doing that's making you uncomfortable was a bad idea. It's probably a wonderful idea, but it's the first time you're doing it. It's a learning process, and it's probably not going to feel great. But that's okay. That's why they call it growing pains. I just want to share other ways in which you can have a voice and lead, and that is by supporting causes that matter to you. Again, this consistency of putting energy and resources behind the things that matter to you. So I do this by being very active in the non-for-profit space. I sit on a couple of boards. One is Lineage Project, and the picture of the young men and women on yoga mats with their feet up. That's from Lineage Project. Lineage Project is an organization that provides mindfulness techniques such as yoga, meditation, and guided conversations to incarcerated and other vulnerable youth to help them develop inner strength, the ability to respond versus react, the ability to manage their impulses and their anger, and the ability ultimately to connect with themselves so that they can then connect with others. I truly, truly believe in mindfulness as an essential way to tap into who we truly are, to raise our awareness about what is our purpose, and to cultivate the confidence and strength to pursue that purpose. I am also on the board of the America Society Visual Arts Program. So the America Society is an organization based here in New York City that promotes inter-American dialogue, but it also has a visual arts program. And so the gallery, the picture of the gallery with the hands, that's a picture of the art gallery at the America Society. It doesn't have its own permanent collection. It's an exhibition space. And the curator there puts on 4 to 5 shows a year showcasing Latin American artists or Latin American artists' reaction to Latin American poetry and or literature. So of course, my passion for art is in full display in my support and the time I dedicate to the work of the America Society. I am also on the donor circle, and I am a former board member of Groundswell. That's the picture of the mural. Groundswell uses the mural making process as a tool for social change. So also working with vulnerable youth, teaching them how to engage with their communities and artists to design and make murals, and throughout the process, discover more of who they are, more of who their communities are, and develop the skills and capacities to develop leadership and to find a sense of purpose and a voice to help them cope with the stress of life. And again, all through the mural making process. And finally, I support ProMujer. ProMujer is a micro lending organization that helps women in Latin America develop small businesses through micro lending. The beauty of the micro lending is that it builds community. So every loan that ProMujer gives one of these female entrepreneurs in Latin America is actually guaranteed by another woman in her community. So they're all invested in each other's success. The default rate of these loans is practically zero. The other wonderful aspect of this organization is that in order to be eligible to get these loans, the women need to go through an educational and healthcare program where they get tested for different types of cancer, where they get instruction about how to cope with home violence, which unfortunately is very prevalent in Latin America, and just how to run a business, learning about business, financial literacy, and again, going back to this idea of learning how to be independent and self-sufficient in the world, which is another core value of mine. In my own immediate community at JP Morgan Chase, I'm also involved in leadership and inclusion. I'm active with the Babson alumni community, but at JP Morgan, I am part of our Hispanic Employee Network, the Women's Network. I mentor many women across the organization, and I'm part of the Hispanic Executive Forum. All of this at JP Morgan Chase. I am also a member of ALPHA, which is a national organization of Hispanic professionals and students. I like I said, I probably spend about an hour of a week on average mentoring young men and women. A fun picture on the corner of this slide was taken during Hispanic Heritage Month a couple of weeks ago, where I had the joy of interviewing Chef Aaron Sanchez, who is just a passionate advocate for giving Hispanics the opportunity to grow. He actually has a foundation that helps Latin American emerging chefs get a scholarship to go to cooking school, basically chef school, and develop their own potential in the kitchen. So this just recaps a lot of what we've talked about, right? Just to sort of begin my wrap up here, cultivating self-acceptance, empathy towards yourself and others is a foundational building block of leading with your voice. Using those tips that I shared and others that I would love. I'm a constant learner, so I'm sure there's many ways of doing this. Developing little by little the courage and just the habit. It's a skill. All of these things can be learned, of speaking up, remembering that it will feel uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong happening. It's just that you're learning something new, and there's a reason why they call it growing pains. Being prepared, disciplined, working hard, that's essential, right? There's no substitute for hard work. We all know that. But doing it and preparing, those are huge confidence boosters. And by the way, by doing that, you are being leaders. You are being role models for the people that work with you. Making time for the things that bring you joy and pleasure. The arts is a huge part of my life, and it will always be a part of my life. And every time I see an exhibit or chat with an artist, I just get a new boost of energy and optimism and joy that just keeps me going. We need some levity in our lives. It's not all work all the time. It's very important that we fully embrace that. Surrounding ourselves with supportive people that will give us advice, that will be truth tellers, right? We need people to give us feedback that is nurturing, that we can embrace. Is absolutely essential. Human beings are social animals. We're not meant to do this alone. Don't make it hard on yourself. You will not get extra credit for doing it alone. And just one last point, I get a lot of questions about networking. I think there's this misconception that networking is about volume. It's about linking in with a bunch of people on LinkedIn or getting a bunch of business cards. That's not networking. Networking is identifying people that connect with you in some way, someone you admire, somebody that you consider a role model, somebody that has a skill or is in a field that is of interest to you. But most importantly, somebody that you won't just meet once with a handshake. It's somebody that you are going to be willing and motivated to stay in touch with over time. And it's somebody with whom you will build a relationship over time. That's a network. And I highlighted specifically because leadership is also about having influence. And it's very difficult to be influential if we don't have networks of people. Finally, my last slide. Here are some things to consider just to keep you informed of what's going on in the world, which is always helpful. And then just ideas of how you can connect with other people, again, on the theme of building your network. My last plug will be for an app, Insight Timer, for anybody who's interested in building a meditation practice. Sometimes you just need the right tool, which is what happened with me. I, for years, tried to learn to meditate and stick to a daily meditation practice. And it wasn't until I found this app, frankly, that I was able to stick to it. And it was extremely helpful. So with that, I will turn it over to Scotty.
Thank you. That was incredible, and it was so great to learn more about you and listen to your story and all of the really helpful insight that you've had. So just to have a few questions, and if anyone watching has questions, feel free to put those into the chat box on the right of the screen. I could read those as well. But to start, I wanted to ask you, as you moved around, you started in Nicaragua and then you went to Costa Rica, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And so how did you, and then when you moved to the US, so how did you maintain kind of your focus on school and studying with everything going on and all of the moving that you had to do? How did you stay focused on your studies? Because that is something that a lot of us have to deal with, moving around.
Yeah. That's a great question. You know, I'd actually never thought about it, but I actually think that school and my studies were the actual constant that gave me something to hold on to as I adapted to these changing environments. So school was like my home base. It is true that I went to different schools. I didn't go into that. I actually went to like 5 different schools by the time I was in high school because of all the moving around. But there was something very anchoring in the environment of the school, having a schedule, having the subjects that we were focusing on, my homework, my reading. That structure was extremely supportive and helpful to me. So if anything, school helped me anchor in spite of all the moves going on in my life.
Great. Yeah, that's great. That's a good point. And so coming to the US, what types of kind of personal challenges did you have adapting to the American culture, and how did you overcome those?
Honestly, the biggest challenge was having my true self coexist with the new sort of cultural environment of my new community, so to speak. Initially, my only answer was to kind of ignore my background, try to make it go away, and just try to blend in. And I really didn't have any other models of adapting. Like the only thing I thought to do was, let me just copy what people do, what people say. Let me literally just blend in. Like, what TV shows do people watch? Like, that was really my only coping mechanism. And I think part of it is because maybe I had to go through that to get the strength and the ability to say, wait, there is a different model here. I don't have to completely reject my background. I don't have to completely sort of shut the light down on what makes me Nicaraguan, having grown up in Costa Rica, etc., to sort of coexist and be happy here. And the aha moment was this idea that I could actually be of service, that I could contribute to a better experience for all to the degree that I was authentic. so that my authenticity and what I brought to the table was additive as opposed to something that would isolate me. It actually brought me in closer, and because I felt better about myself, I could be more authentic, and I actually ended up building much better relationships because I was in a much better state of mind when I decided and I realized that embracing who I am would actually be a better outcome for all.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Um, and so you mentioned also kind of adding on to that, you mentioned something else that was helpful was building your tribe and kind
Yeah.
of building that network of supportive people that are close to you. So who's in your tribe and how did you find them and how do you support each other?
Well, I have a couple of women that are a little older than me that are in the industry, in banking, that I've known for many, many years. They're like my surrogate big sister and my surrogate tia, aunt, I guess, here in the United States. And they've walked the path ahead of me, and they're kind of my elder wise women that I look up to, and they bring me very valuable perspective. My husband is definitely part of that board of directors, and he's my truth teller. He will call me out if I start talking about wanting to go in this direction or that direction career wise. He'll remind me that I tried that before and it didn't work. And he'll just, he will gently and lovingly keep me honest. And that's absolutely essential. I also have people that I've met through my involvement with the arts that I trust and I have friendships with, women that I've met through my involvement with women advancement that have also become part of my board of directors. And one thing I'll say is that tribe, the more diverse it is, the more powerful. So my tribe is not made up of all Wall Street women. It's not even made up of all professional women. I have women who were former dancers. I have one of my friends who's like an art critic who's in that tribe. And that cross-functional exchange of ideas has made that tribe that much more powerful and helpful. And by the way, I'm on their tribe too. And that's what's beautiful about this, that it's reciprocal. And so it's the more diverse it is, the better.
Absolutely. And so you were talking about the importance of debating ideas and how even though sometimes it can be a little uncomfortable, it's so important. How do you have those dialogues in settings where you are kind of the minority when it is a predominantly white male space and maybe they don't take your perspective very seriously.
Yep.
How do you manage that and how do you manage being uncomfortable but standing your ground and having those debates and discussions?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Well, first, it really depends because there are some of these white men with whom over time I have managed to develop a relationship. And it's been about finding the middle ground. So yes, we have differences, but we're all human beings. And we have to make the effort, and it served me well. Try to find something to have in common, right? And use that as a little grain of sand to sort of build on. But assuming it's a group of white men that I don't know, they don't know me. I mean, it's kind of like I have nothing going for me. A couple of things that have helped. One is to very briefly, as I'm posing the question, preface it by reiterating the goal that we're all united around, right? So that the comment comes in as supportive and constructive of a shared objective. And sometimes the question could be, can we just go back and recap what we're trying to achieve here? And so the discussion goes into what the goal is, and then that gives the opening for my comment, which will be obviously aligned to what the goal is. So I'm not coming across as sort of anxious or nervous or sort of militant about wanting to debate. I'm trying to move us all in the right direction. And I think that helps people's defenses come down and open their ears and their mind to hear what I have to say.
Absolutely. That's a great tool we can all use, I think. So we're out of time, but I did want to just ask one last question because it really struck me that you said you had never thought about finance before until, you had that experience with your roommate. And finance and business can be very overwhelming. It can be very difficult to understand and confusing. And so, what would you say to young people who maybe are interested in a career field but are intimidated by it?
So, like any field, when you're the outsider, it seems complex and opaque. But little by little, if this is something you're interested in, there is absolutely a learning curve that will ultimately reveal that it's actually not as complicated as it sounds. It's about learning what things means, right? It's semantics. There's a lot of jargon in finance. And so my recommendation would be start with your own personal finances. Do a little bit of reading about how to best manage your checking account, your savings account. What's a 401k if you live here in the United States? Like, start with the basic building blocks. Do you have a budget? Do you track your spending? Do you have a sense of where your income goes, your salary or your allowance or whatever your sources are? How do you spend them? If your goal is to save a little bit, what things could you modify? It really starts at the most basic level. If you work in a store, if you're in retail, just paying attention of, how they manage the business. How do they track sales versus expenses? Just the basic building blocks. And frankly, what I learned at my father's shoe stores about business are the exact same principles that I used to run my business at JP Morgan Chase today. So there's a lot of jargon that might make this seem more complicated than it is. Start learning little by little, and before you know it, you'll be picking up the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times and understanding everything that you read.
Great. Well, we do have one question from the audience. They said, how do you keep your emotions in check when you're having a difficult conversation? So you mentioned a little bit about being okay with being uncomfortable. How do you do that?
So my meditation practice has been absolutely essential for that, because before that, I actually can think of a couple of examples where my anger or anxiety or fear overrode my executive function, right? My ability to be reasonable and be present. Meditation has helped me recall myself to the present moment, to step away from the drama, from the fear, and stay grounded and a lot more deliberate, a lot more intentional about the conversation I want to have. The other thing I'll say is that sometimes if the emotions are going too high and it's difficult to control, there's nothing wrong with hitting the pause button and say, you know what, I'd like to regroup my thoughts. Can we agree to pick this conversation up tomorrow? Can we agree to pick this conversation up in a couple of hours? Because this is important. I want this to be constructive. And right now I feel that we're just not moving the dialogue forward. So there's nothing wrong with hitting the pause button. But I will say that mindfulness techniques over time will develop the skill set to help you bring it back to the present moment and give you a little bit more control of how you handle yourselves real time.
Those are great tips. Definitely, I can use those myself. So thank you.
You're very welcome.
Much for your time and for the amazing tips and stories that you shared with us today. I think we can all get a lot from that. We have your information here for people to get in contact with you via LinkedIn. We can share these links as well on our website. Let me see if we have, yes. So our next speaker is for next month, Radhika Dut is going to be sharing with us a little bit about her background and her story. So hopefully all of you who joined us today can join us next month. We'll be sharing the date and time. But thank you so much, Carolina, for everything. And we really appreciate you taking time to share with us with Speak Mentorship today.
You're very welcome. Have a great day.
You too.